The cargo shuttle descended through Earth's gray atmosphere, carrying its most unusual passenger toward an uncertain fate. Maya Chin pressed her palm against the cold window, watching her home planet shrink behind her. She was 17 years old, and she had just volunteered to become property of the Zalthor Empire. The decision had been simple, really. When the alien administrators announced they needed one human for the Emperor's personal collection, Maya's family had drawn the short lot. Her parents would have gone to the labor camps. Her younger brother would have been sent to the re-education facilities. By volunteering herself, she saved them all. The Empire honored such exchanges. They were cruel, but they kept their word. Now, 3 days later, Maya stood in a staging chamber aboard the massive palace ship called Eternal Dominion. Alien attendants had dressed her in something between a gown and a specimen display outfit. The fabric shimmered with colors that hurt her eyes. They had bathed her, examined her, and treated her like an exotic pet being prepared for showing. "The human will proceed," announced a mechanical voice. The doors opened, and Maya walked into the throne room. She had seen pictures of alien architecture before, but nothing prepared her for this. The chamber stretched upward for what seemed like miles. Crystalline pillars twisted toward a ceiling that displayed a live view of the stars outside. Hundreds of alien courtiers lined the walls, representing dozens of species Maya couldn't name. Some had too many limbs. Others floated without bodies. A few looked almost human until they moved in ways that bones shouldn't bend. At the far end, elevated on a platform of black stone, sat Emperor Zarketh himself. He was massive, easily 12 feet tall, with obsidian scales that reflected the light like dark mirrors. For eyes, arranged vertically on his elongated head, watched her approach. His hands, resting on the arms of his throne, had 6 fingers each, tipped with claws that could probably cut through steel. He wore robes of deep purple and a crown that seemed to be made of frozen lightning. Maya walked the length of the throne room, her footsteps echoing. She had been instructed to stop at the bottom of the stairs and bow. She did. "The human specimen from Earth, Your Eminence," announced a herald. "Volunteered tribute. Verified primitive intelligence. Psychically null, as expected from the species." The Emperor leaned forward slightly. Around him, Maya noticed several aliens with elaborate headpieces. The telepathic council, she realized. The Empire's psychics who advised the Emperor and protected his mind from attack. Zarketh's voice rumbled like distant thunder. "Stand, human. Let me examine what Earth considers worthy of my attention." Maya stood. She had promised herself she wouldn't show fear, even though her heart hammered against her ribs. She looked directly at the Emperor, meeting his four-eyed gaze. That's when she felt it, a pressure against her thoughts. Not painful, but present, like someone gently pushing against a door in her mind. The Emperor was trying to read her, to probe her memories and intentions. It was standard procedure, she'd been told. The psychic scan would confirm she wasn't a threat, but Maya had always been different. Even on Earth, she'd known things she shouldn't know. Her mother's migraines before her mother felt them. Her teacher's bad news before it was announced. Her brother's fears in the middle of the night, when he pretended to be brave. The doctors called it extreme empathy. Maya had learned to call it a curse. Now, feeling the Emperor's mental touch, something clicked into place. It wasn't that he was pushing into her mind. It was that his mind was leaking, like a radio broadcast she could suddenly tune into, and what she heard made her freeze. Another primitive creature, beautiful in its way, I suppose. The humans fought bravely during the invasion. Perhaps this species is worth preserving in some capacity. Their resistance reminded me of, the thought carried an image. A younger alien, female, with the same obsidian scales. Affection radiated from the memory and deep sadness. Maya spoke before she could stop herself. "Your Eminence is thinking about whether my species is worth preserving." She paused, seeing something flicker in those 4 eyes. Confusion, perhaps. She continued, her voice quiet but clear in the vast chamber. "And you're remembering someone named Velsera." The throne room went completely silent. Every alien stopped moving. The telepathic council turned their heads in unison toward Maya, their expressions shocked. Emperor Zarketh laughed. It was a terrible sound, like stones grinding together in an avalanche. He laughed because the idea was absurd. Humans were psychically null. They couldn't even communicate telepathically with each other, let alone read a mind protected by the most advanced mental shields in the galaxy. But then his laughter stopped. His four eyes widened, all of them, fixed on a small human girl, standing at the base of his throne. Because Maya was right. Velsera was his daughter's name. A name he hadn't spoken aloud in 3 centuries. The guards came for Maya within minutes. They didn't hurt her, but their grip on her arms was firm as they marched her through corridors of polished metal and strange lighting. She was taken to a room that was part prison cell, part luxury suite. Soft furniture, a bed that adjusted to her body, walls that displayed calming images of Earth's oceans. But the door was locked, and she could feel sensors watching her every movement. For 2 days, Maya saw no one except the automated systems that delivered food. She ate alone, slept fitfully, and wondered if she had just signed her own death warrant by speaking that name. On the 3rd day, they came, a group of scientists, led by a thin alien with gray skin and too many joints in his arms. He introduced himself as Chief Scholar Rickson, and his voice carried a mixture of curiosity and hostility. "You will cooperate with our examinations," Rickson said, setting up equipment around her. "The Emperor wishes to understand how you performed your trick." "It wasn't a trick," Maya said quietly. "Impossible," Rickson snapped. "Humans are psychically null. Your entire species. We have documented this extensively. You cannot transmit thoughts. You cannot receive thoughts. Your minds produce only static interference that makes you unreadable. This is scientific fact." But the test began anyway. They scanned her brain with devices that hummed and clicked. They placed her in chambers filled with telepathic aliens who tried to communicate with her. They monitored her neural patterns while showing her images and sounds. Every result came back the same. Maya's brain showed no psychic transmission ability, no telepathic centers, nothing that should allow her to read minds. Yet she continued to prove them wrong. When Rickson thought about taking a break, Maya asked if he wanted tea before he spoke. When a guard outside her room worried about his sick child, Maya asked the guard to pass along her hope that the child would recover soon. The guard hadn't mentioned his child to anyone on the ship. When Rickson remembered his own daughter who had died in a mining accident years ago, Maya's eyes filled with tears, and she said, "I'm so sorry about your loss." She had your eyes, didn't she? Rickson had stumbled backward, his equipment clattering to the floor. "How?" he whispered. "How can you possibly know these things?" The scientists argued among themselves. Some claimed Maya was using hidden technology. Others insisted she was somehow guessing based on microexpressions and behavior. But the test continued, and Maya kept demonstrating knowledge she shouldn't have. She knew which scientists were skeptical and which were becoming believers. She knew when the shift rotations would change before announcements. She even knew that one researcher was planning to recommend her termination before he filed his report. On the 7th day, Emperor Zarketh came to her cell personally. He filled the doorway with his massive frame, his 4 eyes studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. 2 of his telepathic council members flanked him, their own mental shields visibly shimmering in the air around them like heat waves. "Explain yourself, human," Zarketh commanded. "My scientists tell me you are an impossibility, yet you continue to demonstrate abilities that should not exist." Maya stood, facing him despite the fear coursing through her body. She had spent the past week thinking about this, trying to understand her own gift, and she thought she finally had an answer. "Your technology blocks psychic transmission," Maya began slowly. "Every species you encountered sends thoughts outward like radio signals. So you built defenses against incoming signals. Your shields block transmissions perfectly." "Yes," Zarketh said impatiently. "This is basic psychic defense." "But humans never transmitted anything," Maya continued. "We evolved on a world with no psychic energy, no mental signals, complete silence. So instead of learning to broadcast, we learned to listen, really, really carefully." She took a breath, choosing her words carefully. "Your shields block transmissions, but they're not perfect. They leak. Tiny amount of thought energy escape around the edges, like light bleeding around a curtain. Most species can't detect that leakage because they're too busy broadcasting their own signals. But humans, we exist in silence. We can hear whispers that others miss. The room went quiet. One of the council members made a strangled sound. "You're saying every human has this ability?" Zarketh asked, his voice dangerously soft. "I don't know," Maya admitted. "Maybe I'm just more sensitive than most. But potentially, yes, any human could learn to hear what I hear." The Emperor's expression darkened. Maya could feel the sudden spike of concern radiating from him. She realized what he was thinking before he spoke, and her blood ran cold. "You understand what this means," Zarketh said, his 4 eyes blazing. "Your species represents a security threat to my entire empire. Billions of humans, each one a potential spy capable of hearing our most protected secrets." Maya swallowed hard. She had just made her entire species either incredibly valuable or scheduled for extinction. Emperor Zarketh paced the length of Maya's cell, his clawed feet clicking against the floor. She could feel the conflict radiating from his mind like heat from a fire. He was trapped between multiple terrible choices, and for once in his long reign, he didn't know which path to take. If he announced Maya's abilities publicly, panic would spread across the empire. Every official with secrets would demand human blood. Every species that had shared confidential information would cry for Earth's destruction. Trillions of beings had thoughts they wanted kept private, and now an entire planet of potential mind readers existed within his borders. But if he killed Maya quietly and sterilized Earth, he would lose something valuable. The ability to hear unguarded thoughts could be an enormous advantage if controlled properly. Plus, humanity had already proven to be surprisingly resilient. Slaughtering them might trigger exactly the kind of resistance movements that destabilized empires. Maya watched him pace, her hands trembling in her lap. She needed to give him a third option before he chose one of the first two. "Your Eminence," she said quietly, "let me prove that humanity is worth more alive than dead." Zarketh stopped, turning his 4 eyes toward her. "Explain." "Give me 3 tasks," Maya proposed, the words tumbling out quickly before her courage failed. "3 challenges that demonstrate what humans can offer your empire. If I succeed, you grant Earth autonomy, not freedom from the empire, but the right to govern ourselves within it. If I fail even one task, you may do with Earth whatever you wish." The Emperor studied her for a long moment. Around him, she could feel his thoughts churning. The proposal intrigued him. It gave him time to think, time to observe, and if she failed, he would have justification for whatever action he took afterward. "Agreed," Zarketh said finally, "but I choose the tasks, and they will not be easy." 3 days later, Maya stood in the High Council chamber, surrounded by the Empire's most powerful officials. Generals, administrators, economic ministers, and regional governors filled the tiered seats. At the center sat the Emperor, with Maya positioned below him like a curiosity on display. "Your first task," Zarketh announced, his voice carrying through the chamber. "There's a traitor in this room. Someone has been selling military secrets to our enemies. My intelligence officers have narrowed the suspects to this council, but we lack proof. You have 2 days to identify the traitor using your alleged abilities." Maya felt her stomach drop. The room held nearly 50 high-ranking officials. Any one of them could be the traitor. Or perhaps none of them were, and this was simply a test to see if she would falsely accuse someone. For 2 days, Maya attended every council meeting, every public assembly, every dinner gathering where the officials congregated. She didn't ask questions. She simply listened, not to words, but to the thoughts bleeding around the edges of their mental shields. Most thoughts were mundane: boredom during long meetings, hunger, attraction to colleagues, petty jealousies. But Maya learned to recognize patterns. Guilt had a specific texture. Fear of discovery created a particular kind of mental noise. And one mind in the room carried both in overwhelming quantities. General Thexmore was a war hero. His military victories had expanded the Empire's borders significantly. He sat in a position of high honor, decorated with medals earned through decades of service. But when certain topics arose in meetings, his mind screamed with anxiety. On the second day, during a discussion of fleet movements, Maya felt it clearly. Thexmore was thinking about encrypted messages, about payments received, about one more transmission before he could retire quietly. The thoughts leaked out despite his attempts to suppress them. Maya waited until the meeting ended, then approached the Emperor directly. "General Thexmore," she said simply, "check his private communications from the past 6 months. Look for transmissions sent after midnight, encrypted with older security protocols." The investigation took only hours. The evidence was damning. Thexmore had sold fleet positions, supply routes, and defensive weaknesses to 3 different enemy factions. The general was arrested before sunset, screaming that it was impossible, that the human which had fabricated everything. But the data didn't lie. The Empire's hero was a traitor, and Maya had found him. The council buzzed with shock and nervous energy. If a human girl could uncover such a well-hidden betrayal in 2 days, what else might she discover? What other secrets might be exposed? Zarketh summoned Maya that evening. She could feel satisfaction radiating from him, mixed with something else. Respect, perhaps. "Your second task will be more difficult," the Emperor said. "The Kryn Confederacy has been fighting us for 30 years. They are a psychic species who trust no communication from my empire. They believe we manipulate every negotiation telepathically. You will go to their territory as Earth's representative and negotiate a ceasefire. You have 1 month." Maya felt her breath catch. "Your Eminence, I'm 17 years old. I'm not a diplomat." "No," Zarketh agreed, and she caught the edge of his thought. "But you are human, and that may be exactly what this empire needs." The Kryn negotiations had taken 3 weeks of careful work, but Maya had succeeded. By listening to the true feelings beneath the Kryn ambassador's diplomatic words, she had found a common ground that both sides desperately wanted but were too proud to admit. The ceasefire agreement was signed, and for the first time in 30 years, the shooting stopped along the border worlds. Maya returned to the Eternal Dominion, exhausted but cautiously hopeful. 2 tasks completed. 1 remained. She had begun to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could actually save her world. The summons came that same evening, not to a council chamber or a public space, but to the Emperor's private quarters. Maya's escort, a silent guard with silver skin, led her through corridors she had never seen before. These halls were quieter, more intimate. They passed no other beings. The isolation made her nervous. The guard stopped at a door that looked like all the others, then departed without a word. Maya stood alone for a moment before the door opened on its own. Inside, the room was surprisingly simple. No throne, no displays of power, just comfortable furniture, shelves lined with objects from 100 worlds, and large windows showing the stars beyond. Emperor Zarketh stood with his back to her, looking out at the void. "Come in, Maya-chan," he said without turning. "Close the door behind you." She did, her heart pounding. Something felt different about this moment. The Emperor's usual confidence seemed somehow diminished, replaced by something heavier, wearier. "Your 3rd task," Zarketh said, finally turned to face her. His 4 eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her want to step backward. "Tell me what I am thinking right now. All of it. Every thought, every feeling, every secret. Hold nothing back." Maya felt the blood drain for her face. This wasn't a task. This was a trap. If she revealed his private thoughts, his vulnerabilities, his fears, he would have to kill her. No ruler could allow someone to possess such intimate knowledge and live. But if she lied, if she held back or claimed she couldn't read him, he would know. And he would assume she was hiding her abilities for some future betrayal. "Your Eminence," Maya started, her voice shaking. "If I do this, you'll have to execute me. You know that." "Perhaps," Zarketh acknowledged. "Or perhaps I need to know if you can be trusted with power. Either way, this is your task. Complete it or Earth burns." Maya closed her eyes, reaching out with that strange sense she had never asked for. The Emperor's thoughts washed over her like a tide. Normally, she only caught fragments, whispers of surface concerns. But now, as he deliberately lowered some of his shields, she heard so much more. She heard loneliness that stretched across centuries. Zarketh had ruled for over 300 years, and immortality had become a prison. Everyone around him wanted something: power, favor, wealth. No one simply saw him as a person anymore. He had forgotten what genuine connection felt like. She heard grief for Velsera, his daughter, assassinated by political rivals 2 centuries ago. He had avenged her death by destroying entire star systems. But the victory fell hollow. She was still gone, and nothing could bring her back. She heard doubt about the Empire itself. The constant expansion, the endless conquests, the military displays. He had built something vast and powerful. But lately he wondered if strength was the same thing as success. His people were mighty but increasingly empty, defined only by domination. They had forgotten how to create, how to build, how to simply exist without conflict. And beneath all of it, she heard fear, the terror of dying alone, unmourned. With his great empire crumbling the moment his iron will lifted, he feared that he built nothing of lasting value, only a machine of conquest that would consume itself once he was gone. Maya opened her eyes, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You're lonely," she said softly, "more lonely than I can imagine. You miss Velsera every day, and you blame yourself for not protecting her better. You doubt whether all this conquest has made your people stronger or just more isolated from the rest of the galaxy." She took a shaking breath. "You're afraid of dying alone. You're afraid that the moment you're gone, everything you built will fall apart because it was held together by force rather than genuine loyalty. And right now, you're wondering if killing me will solve your problems or just prove that you're exactly what you fear becoming." The massive Emperor stood perfectly still. Maya could feel something shifting in his thoughts. Not anger, not fear, something unexpected. Relief. For the first time in centuries, someone understood him, not because they were forced through telepathic bonding or political necessity, but because another being simply heard him as he truly was. "You are dangerous, Maya-chun," Zarketh said quietly, his voice rough with emotion he hadn't shown in decades. "More dangerous than any weapon in my arsenal." "Because I remind you that you're still a person," Maya replied. "Not just an emperor, a person who hurts and hopes and wonders if any of this matters." The Emperor moved to a chair and sat heavily, suddenly looking ancient despite his physical power. "What do I do with you?" he asked, and it wasn't a threat. It was a genuine question. "You let me help," Maya said. "Not just Earth. The whole Empire. Let humans do what we do best. Listen, really listen, before the problems become rebellions." Zarketh was silent for a long time, his 4 eyes distant. Then, slowly, he nodded. The announcement shook the Empire. Earth would govern itself under imperial protection, maintaining its own laws and leadership, while contributing to the greater whole as an autonomous region. But the truly radical change came in the Emperor's second decree, the creation of the Listener Corps. Humans would be recruited, trained, and placed throughout the Empire as mediators, counselors, and advisors. They would serve in courts, hospitals, military units, and administrative centers. Their purpose was simple, yet revolutionary: to listen, to hear the unspoken grievances before they became violence, to understand the feelings beneath the words. The imperial nobility reacted with predictable outrage. How dare these primitive creatures be given such access? How dare the Emperor trust them with sensitive matters? Protests flooded the palace. 3 governors threatened to secede, and within the first month, there were 2 attempts on Maya's life. The first assassin was a hired killer from the Vex species, masters of stealth and poison. He made it within 10 feet of Maya before she heard his intent loud and clear in her mind. She dove behind a pillar, just as the energy blade sliced through where her head had been. The guards caught him, but Maya knew more would come. The second attempt was more subtle. A junior diplomat offered her a drink laced with a slow-acting toxin. Maya thanked her politely but didn't drink, having heard the woman's nervous guilt before the cup even touched her hand. The diplomat was arrested, screaming that she was protecting the Empire from human contamination. But Zarketh's protection held firm. He assigned Maya a permanent guard detail, and made it clear that any attack on her was an attack on him personally. The assassination attempt slowed, though the resentment remained. Meanwhile, the first group of human listeners arrived at the palace for training. 20 volunteers from Earth, carefully selected for their natural empathy and emotional intelligence. Maya helped design their curriculum, teaching them to recognize the subtle mental leakage that occur around psychic shields, to distinguish true feelings from surface deception. The listeners were deployed carefully at first. One was sent to a mining colony where worker unrest had been building. Within a week, the human mediator identified the real problem, not the wages that workers complained about, but the lack of communication from management that made them feel disposable. Simple changes prevented a strike that could have turned violent. Another listener was placed in a military academy where discipline problems had been escalating. The human counselor discovered that the cadets weren't rebelling against authority. They were terrified of failing and bringing shame to their families. By creating support systems instead of harsher punishments, the academy's performance improved dramatically. Slowly, grudgingly, other species began requesting human mediators. A trade dispute between two planets was resolved when a listener helped both sides express their actual concerns rather than the positions they had locked themselves into. A hospital added a human counselor and found that patients recovered faster when someone truly listened to their fears about treatment. The empire began to change. Not quickly and not without resistance, but change nonetheless. Courts that had relied purely on telepathic evidence started considering human insight about emotional context. Military leaders who had only known intimidation learned that understanding their soldiers' concerns created stronger loyalty than fear ever could. Administrative centers discovered that preventing problems through listening was cheaper than suppressing rebellions. Maya worked beside Emperor Zarketh, serving as his personal counsel. It was strange at first, this human teenager advising a centuries-old ruler. But Zarketh had discovered something valuable in her honesty. She told him things no one else would dare say. When his generals proposed aggressive expansion, Maya heard their true motives, whether glory-seeking or genuine strategic need. When his advisors claimed popular support for policies, Maya could sense whether they were reporting truth or telling him what he wanted to hear. 5 years passed. Then 10. Maya was no longer a teenager, but a young woman who had learned to navigate the dangerous waters of imperial politics. Earth thrived under its autonomy, developing new technologies through collaboration rather than conquest. The listener corps grew to thousands, becoming a respected institution despite initial hostility. On the 10th anniversary of Earth's autonomy, a ceremony was held on Eternal Dominion. Representatives from 100 worlds attended. Maya stood beside the Emperor, now a trusted figure in the Empire despite her youth and human origins. Zarketh looked older somehow, though his species aged slowly. The weight of change had pressed on him, but there was something different in his bearing, something lighter. He thought toward her, knowing she would hear even though he could never hear her response. The words drifted from his mind like a whisper across water. I was wrong about your species. You were not weak. You were patient. Maya smiled, keeping her own thoughts silent as always. But she answered him anyway, in the privacy of her own mind, knowing he would never hear. And you were not just a conqueror. You were waiting for someone to listen. The Zalthor Empire had not fallen. It had not become peaceful overnight. Violence still existed. Injustice still occurred. But something fundamental had shifted in its foundation. The Empire was learning, slowly and painfully, that hearing could be more powerful than speaking, that understanding might be stronger than force. And it all began because one human girl had said 5 simple words that changed everything. I can hear your thoughts.